Hi guys, how are you? Good? Last keynote, guys. I'm sad about that. So, I'm proud one more time we have Professor Oana here to talk about regeneration. Thank you again for sharing your knowledge one more time. Thank you so much, Oana.
Thank you, Grazi. And thank you for organizing this. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first, the best, and the only regeneration school of its size. So over the last 10 days, you have heard from over 100 thought and practice leaders. And it is really a great honor for Matt and I to be your closing act here. So we have prepared a three-stage presentation. I'm going to give you my latest keynote, which is Regeneration 3.0. We have a report coming as well. And that gives me an opportunity to take stock of what regeneration has and continues to mean as we think about leadership, what it has meant and continues to mean when we talk about strategies and supply chain organizing and principles, and also what it means when we start thinking about the future in a radically new way. I'm going to present some new work that is currently under review, and some of the old work on cross-sector partnership is very much available in the public domain, and I will refer to it. But I chose to position this closing keynote, my intro part, asking ourselves, how do we partner with nature? And I'm going to use the word partnership very deliberately as we go through the segments. As soon as we go through these Regeneration 3.0 stages, I'm going to introduce my colleague and very, very much thought leader on all knowledge systems, who will provoke you with a new book that he is in the process of publishing. And it's also a system of knowledge that was published in all academy journals a couple of months ago. And that is radically encouraging us to radically rethink what we do, what we know, how we know, and how we go from knowing better to doing better. And then we will sit in a corner and engage you in a dialogue as to how do we use our knowledge systems, past and future, to regenerate our world. So hopefully those of you who stayed will have an amazing time by interacting with us and posing great questions that hopefully will end up being in Matt's book, and hopefully in the Regeneration 3.0 report as well. And those who are not with us physically, hopefully they will be able to see this recording and enjoy it afterwards. For me, regeneration is not a new thing. I've been working with regeneration as an academic for about 10 years without knowing everything I have written or studied over the last 30 years of my academic career has been on this degenerative regenerative continuum that is now a new framework of organizing science. And I'm going to introduce you to some of these big frameworks in just a minute. So at the time, we didn't have words like degenerative. We also didn't have words like regenerative until very recently. Really, the conversation on regeneration started towards the end of 2023, and it peaked in 2024, which is literally about a year and a half ago, as the World Economic Forum and Davos declared regeneration the future, not just of business, not just of economies, but of life on Earth. And this is not a very small statement for an organization known for its for-profit mandate and for being a think tank for the leaders of the world. So I think what my goal would be, however, is to ground you in much more ancient systems, things that we are all discovering together, and to challenge you to no longer think yourself as disconnected from nature, but as an intricate living part of a living ecosystems of other beings, whether you refer to them as non-human or more than human, and to really start feeling the ebb and flow of life and the inspiration that that brings to you in your respective disciplines, in your own way of using and engaging with knowledge. So this comes from indigenous economies from all over the world, and it encourages us to be part of the natural cycles around us, whether they're negative or positive. And you may ask yourself, why? Why would I grieve the melting glaciers? Why would I take stock of the burning Amazon and the ash of the trees? Why would we do that? Because it reestablishes a fundamental bond of kinship that many of us have never learned. We have never learned to value what we have until we lose it. And then that's not the end. We can play again and we can learn to value what we still have. And we can engage in moments of awe and hope and joy and inspiration, well known to stimulate creativity and move us forward. So these negative and positive cycles are as natural as nature itself, and we cannot avoid them. But the trick is not to let one trump the other, is to use the losses to revalue what we still have, and to use what we still have and to preserve it so that it doesn't get lost. Being part of the system challenges us to be more, not less. These are just some of my favorite headlines. This is Paul Hawken's latest book and one of my absolute favorites, in which I encourage you, if you really have a strong spirituality, I encourage you to adopt this as your Bible. This cuts across all religion, including science, and it reacquaints us to carbon and the importance of carbon in all that we are and all that we do. These are some of the headlines. The World Economic Forum, the future of sustainable business is regeneration. A very good comment, like forget resilience. To truly thrive, businesses must set their sights on regeneration. And my favorite, and you're gonna see this again towards the end of the presentation, we must regenerate the future for a second chance on Earth. Sounds pretty doom and gloom, right? This idea that we're approaching the limits. I didn't copy and paste the planetary boundaries, but you probably already know that since September, we have exceeded 8 of the 9. And the only reason we can not say for sure we have exceeded the 9th is because we have no way to measure the 9th. So the reality, however, is that as we think in those big pictures, we also have to remember that regeneration and degeneration is not a state, it's not a photo, it's a moving picture. Just about the time when our articles on the Anthropocene was published, exactly in the same month, just a couple of days apart, colleagues of ours published a Nature Sustainability article, a review article. Ours is based on about 6 years of work in the field. Theirs is based on a review of the science. And I'm gonna spend a few minutes on this graph. So take it in. It's public access. It basically tells us that unless we keep this funnel twirling upward, it's gonna twirl downward. And as it turns downward, we degenerate. We burn, we deforest, we pollute the oceans, we over-extract. Pretty much the history of the capitalism goes downhill from the blue funnel. We are so good of degenerative organizing, aren't we? We really know how to do it. And it's not just with nature. We have books and articles talking about how we enslave other human beings. We know how to do harm so much better than how to do good. We're just beginning to write the books on how to work with nature, to partner with nature so that we can regenerate. But I want to focus your attention on that origin, that point of origin, because all organizing happens around that point. It's not about being the most regenerative. It's not about conserving the most land. It's about figuring out how we turn around that negative degenerative dynamic into a positive one. And we will talk with examples of businesses and organizations today, but I really, really want you, as we end the conversation, as we end this marathon, 10-day marathon together, I want you to take that point of origin seriously into your lives and to reflect on what can you still turn around. Some things we will lose, we have no choice. What can we still save? How can we still save it? And it could be the mind of a student, or it could be a new entrepreneurship pitch, or it could be a colleague that is setting up to do an activism campaign. It could be something small, but turning that thinking around, where we're no longer thinking about how to do less harm, but how to do more good, is a revolution personally and spiritually. And you will see the world differently, I promise you. You will see the same tree that you have gone past 1,000,000 times all your life. You will see it differently if you start paying attention to that point of origin. Now, you may still shop and you may still consume, and we will get into those nitty-gritty, but your relationship with life, with carbon, it will start having new meaning. And from that new meaning, you will start asking new questions, including the how to. How do we do things differently? You're not going to be the first ones. I'm sorry. Paul Hawken has been doing this for a long time. You have already seen a couple of other leaders in the workshop. I will remind you about them. We have about 50 years of conversations in which regenerative leaders change the world. You learned yesterday about Natura as well. Natura is not only the world's largest B Corp, but it is the first organization in the whole world that has a commitment to life, not a report, a commitment to life. And they report on how they engage themselves with life. This 1.0 chapter was written by great leaders, by the founder of Patagonia, by Yvon Chouinard, who continues to express his commitment to nature, who seeks that middle point and seeks to turn around the next degenerative momentum into a regenerative momentum. And I have a few examples about leaders from Brazil in a moment. But these leaders could build one organization at a time, could write one book at a time, could give one TED Talk at the time. And they gained followership, some of them significant followership, but people still thought, oh, we can have only one Patagonia, we can have only one Natura, we can have only one Paul Hawken, right? In the second stage, which started, actually, we started it in about 2017. We started it in Latin America. The notion of regeneration, the word regeneration came to me and my co-author, Pablo Munoz, as we were working in Chile. And the entrepreneurs we were working with, they were talking to us about life-giving enterprises. And we looked at each other, it was like, this is what we're going to study. This is how do enterprises give life to communities, give life to ecosystems. Because if business can do that, then there is nothing better to study than how businesses do that. It's not just businesses, by the way. All type of organizations, nonprofit, activist, mobilization organization, collective action can do that, can be sources of life in socio-ecological systems. You have already heard from Tobias, and we all cite each other's work, so I didn't put his typology of 4 strategies back up. But him and Maya Tempe wrote that a review article at a time when there was very little empirical work in our field. But there were expectations of what it is to conserve and what it is to preserve. And most of us borrow this knowledge from other disciplines. We know what it is to do so because we have friends in agriculture or environmental studies or critical geography that have preoccupied themselves with these regenerative dynamics. But in terms of regenerative strategies, the tsunami wave came this year in 2025. The latest was Pepsi announcing not just a regenerative strategy, but pivoting all its sustainability commitments towards regeneration and giving grants as of September so that many others could start. A lot of the very large agricultural production companies declare themselves regenerative. Now, I'm going to create a little bit of tension because you know what paradox is. When less water than they need to build more resilience for working with nature close enough to understand how thirsty the vine that produces the grape is. And of course, they went on to win all sorts of awards. So there is no greenwashing at Emiliana. Not only that, but they don't overclaim on regeneration. And many of the most regenerative small businesses, many of them are wineries, some of them are beef and cattle producers, do not overclaim regeneration. But then we have the big producers, and they have very, very big and bold claims. And I want you to think for a second and ask yourself, how? How are they regenerative? Because in Regeneration 2.0, it's their origin point. They're not yet engaging a regenerative dynamics, but they want to. They want to put strategies in motion that turn that momentum around. And sure enough, we're writing about what greenwashing means when you claim regeneration, but you're not yet beginning to be regenerative. It may take years, possibly decades before you are. But you can still declare regenerative strategies because you're starting to twirl that momentum around, to start from practices that you know for sure do harm, and starting to experiment, to try out practices that you hope will do better for nature. So regenerative strategy is really our common origin points, and as we see more commitments, more declarations, we start settling into this as-if world, as if the present is regenerative. But is it? So Regeneration 3.0 moves us to a slightly different place, and that's a place of imagination, of possibility, of futurity, in which we go beyond the commitments we dare to make today to radical imaginaries. We go to places like I have invited you to travel along with me yesterday, to the Sechems of the world, to the Vejas of the world, to the Kaporas of the world. And we can see things that we don't believe are possible just yet. And this Regeneration 3.0 is not here, but it could be. It's not in our system, but it could be. It's not part of our non-regenerative and sometimes degenerative economies, but it could be. We could find those connections. And I'm going to share with you one of the stories that is making the future possible today, and it's changing our imaginaries later in the talk. But I really want you to start thinking, what if you could go from the declarations, from the strategy, from that point of origin, and you could afford yourself to time travel 10, 20, 30 years into the future, 80 years into the future if you're still in your 20s, and imagine the end of that funnel. Go to places that are fully regenerative, where life flows uninterrupted and where there is gift and abundance for all species. We may never experience that in our flesh and bones, but those imaginaries are what makes the Patagonia of the world possible. And then the cycle continues. And then the leaders of today that begin to dream those dreams, they can create our worlds tomorrow. These are the stories that you have seen yesterday, and it just has a different graphic to it. It has this DNA of life. And it reminds us that regeneration is a belief system. It's a belief of practice. It's something we learn how to do. Nobody knows it. Abulash did not know this when he founded SECAM. Louis did not know how this would work, exactly what would be the paces of growth or the economic models, but you try and then you calibrate and recalibrate the model. Lara Liboni, who is not here with us, but she introduced me. A lot of her family, including her father, her sister, have worked with this group, and they have been part in different roles of radically reshaping the whole industry, an industry that São Paulo, I understand, is known for. Do I have some smiles from the sugar cane? Yeah, no. An industry that was part of the colonial industry of the country, but was also part of the modernization of the country, of the shift to the clean economy. Every single practice had been changed. 22 years ago, there is a video. This is the invitation. The video was published in 2021, but it documents the beginning, that turnaround for the Balwa Group, and it's with Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Today, the third point of circularity is regeneration. So it says, eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest value, and regenerate nature. 20 years ago, nobody knew how to do that. The fine print on this had not been written. There was no regenerative organic certification that, by the way, the Balwa Group was one of the first to do. They imagined and they led and they created the strategy not just for themselves, but for their competitors, for the industry, for the association. One of the things that impressed me most, down to the tires of the trucks that harvest, down to the process of extracting the sugar from the cane, so that even though sugarcane is a monoculture, they could restore corridors and have wildlife traveling and rehabilitate rivers. And this is a beautiful story. And it also plays to the home crowd, because most of us travel all over the world, but we may not know the jewels that were born and raised here in Brazil. This is one of my latest friends from Silicon Valley. We got to sit on a panel in October, and they have a portable circular facility in which they go municipality to municipality, and they take all plastic waste in a container of about a quarter of this stage and produce new plastic at the community level. They actually, I'm not going to show this video, but it's a 3-minute, it's a Hollywood production, because the engineers that had to explain the science to their stakeholder had to get it just right. Just right, because if people did not understand they don't use oxygen in their production, they almost kicked them out because they thought they're polluting the air. They don't, because the new technologies don't use oxygens. So every community in the world, people were coming and saying, please come to my community, let us be part of this experiment. This idea that we can transform our economies with very, very small intervention. Again, that point of origin. And we're working with with Nancy Bocan, who's one of the founders of the circularity discussion, and with Stefano Pascucci, who is an agronomist himself, on what would this turn be? Like if we wanted more companies to be like Balbo, or we wanted them to really reinvent science and technology so that we become more regenerative in the future. What would that look like? And we thought, let's start in 3 directions. Let's start talking about sufficiency. What would be just enough? Can we move our economies to a state of sufficiency? Could we really lean into biomimicry and understand those processes as organizing principles, as partnership principles, not just as a leaf is a leaf is a leaf, but hey, a leaf is still a miraculous technology that turns sunlight into every nutrient that we need. Very efficient. You've already heard about this particular paper. It's a paper we're very proud of. Laura Albareda and myself spent a lot of time on frozen lakes, talking to fishermen, and even going fishing with the fishermen to understand this model. But you've heard a little bit about the stories and the businesses, and I really hope that you will follow us. We're going back to the Arctic Circle in just a couple of weeks. But what we learned in this paper is how do we begin? It's that 0 point, it's that origin point. It's who and how knows how to begin a positive cycle when we're stuck in a negative one. And the story of Ari, who's the founder of Jarki Sarki, he has watched this intervention fail for 20 years. He never even bothered trying because he had seen it fail so many times. But one winter, they just got a lot of this little fish. They can't even feed this fish to the dogs. It's culturally inappropriate to feed this fish to the dogs. But he is an environmentalist, hardcore environmentalist, and he would not throw the fish. So him and his wife in their kitchen, Maria and Ari, tried to find a way for that fish to be eaten. And they created a product, a delicious product. I eat it all the time. But it's not about the product. What they realized, they understood this biomanipulation practice that was well researched by science. They understood how to bring business to that table. They understood that the intervention had failed not because the environmental science was well established, but because nobody had a successful product. Nobody had a valorization. They didn't have a supply chain for it. Nobody could buy into the problem. And by the time people bought into the problem, they could clean the water of 1 million Helsinki dwellers that maybe never went to that lake, but could become part of this circular and regenerative chain. Figuring it out, what we call material abduction. For some of you in the room, you hear the word abduction, and you know there are 3 ways of knowing, right? You're learning from data inductively. You're learning deductively. Deduction is also known as the hard sciences, inductive mind. But an abduction is a process of discovery. But here we called it material abduction because it was so biophysical and so immersed in the environment and so attuned. And once they figured things out, they could turn collapsed ecosystem to full health. One of the lakes we studied is the Lahti Lake, which had been so polluted in the 60s that people could not swim in the lake. Swimming in the lake was prohibited. This is not an exception. There are many lakes that are polluted beyond swimming. 2 years before we started our research, it was the green capital of Europe. One of the cleanest ecosystems in the world. They used other practices on that lake, not just what we are talking about, but the lake continues to be turned around on that green funnel of regeneration by 2 entrepreneurs that are working with 20 different fishers. And they had, by the time we interviewed them, generated more than 100 circular products. So the potential of the material abduction to create that green upward funnel is immense. Because as people tune into those cycles, they see opportunities that nobody else has seen. They learn to valorize it, and they create the cycles and the economies of the future. You have already seen these principles: proportionality, reciprocity, and polyrhythmicity. They come from an editorial for a special issue that Yuri is lead editing in the Journal of Supply Chain Management. It's very important to understand these 3 principles together as part of a triangle. And for us, starting with the rhythms of nature, with those natural cycles, with immersing ourselves into those cycles is very important. Because otherwise we don't know what just enough is. We don't know what sufficiency and abundance mean anymore. And we don't know what reciprocity means because we haven't restored a kinship relationship with those ecosystems. Sure, we should try today, if we can, to consume a little less, to enter a relationship of mutual flourishing with a species or a tree or a park, as you have done a couple of days ago. But until we connect these principles and we create supply chains that actually have meaning to cultural systems and environmental systems, we're not beginning to move uphill. And it is an uphill battle. We started working with how companies partner with nature for about 10 years. But we have an award-winning case. It's a small cidery. Cideries are it's very Canadian, very US, very much craft here. I think you can have craft dairies if you like ice cream, or craft cideries, and of course craft breweries as well. And this is a story about 20 years of how someone regenerated a patch of land into being not only the first, but the best, the most sustainable cidery in North America. Became really a standard for what is possible, so much so that young couples are abandoning their consulting jobs and going back to the land and starting these new businesses, right? So it's a very cute, great story. But underneath the cute story is this recipe for how do we partner with nature. I do want to acknowledge my co-authors. So on the case studies is Alex Burton, Said Rahman, and Natalie Slawinski, all of whom have published multiple papers on regeneration in different special issues and by themselves. And Said actually wrote his thesis on regeneration. And this is a co-authored work with a new doctoral student, Lauren Walter. So Said is leading and Natalie and myself are supporting them. But we are showing what does it mean to partner with nature. And you'd expect, as we have shown in our prior study, that you need to learn a lot with and from nature. But the most surprising finding is not what we learn, it's not what we add, but what we remove is what we need to unlearn by partnering with nature, of what we need to question and challenge and sometimes forget about what we know. And this idea, we talk a lot about the co-benefits. I think this is very exciting for people to know. But this idea of how do we continue to engage with one another and taking harder questions and starting to move this forward. This is my newest, I fall in love with the businesses I study, and this is my latest adventure. It started in September, end of August, and they continue to make history. This is part of a short video that the World Economic Forum features. They are a game changer in Canada. All the way on the West Coast, they're trying to work with Indigenous communities, and they have the claims that they're the largest cultivator of oceans. So all week long, you've heard a lot about regenerative agriculture. You haven't heard a lot about regenerative aquaculture, which is quite regenerative. And the science is really, really good on it. In these particular communities, they cultivate monocultures of algae, they shade the ocean, and they already have success story. With the shading, they reduce the temperature of the ocean just enough for the salmon to come back, and for species that were on the brink of extinction to flourish again. And I want to give you a little bit of just a flavor and to invite you to see, again, I'm not going to play this video, but it's a beautiful, beautiful video. And they have videos from all the indigenous communities they partner with. But this made history in Canada because it's one of the first times that a community becomes a shareholder in a for-profit company. As custodians of nature, they want not just the rights to nature, not just the rights to be custodians of nature, but they want the rights for future generation to learn how to be custodians of nature by working with Cascadia. And the exit plan of companies like this is beautiful. They want the communities to own the company, and then they want to go do this all over again on another continent. And all continents, but especially we see a lot of indigenous partnerships in Australia and New Zealand. A lot of these indigenous communities have never lost the rights to water, but many of them have lost the practices of working with the marine ecosystems in a way in which they are custodians of them. And it's also very important for intergenerational knowledge transfer and wealth transfer, because you want, in these new economies, you want to be part of the revenues. This is the bit where I'm going to hand it over to Matt in a minute. But I like to end all my talks with just this one phrase: the future is regenerative. And it just has to be. I am not able to imagine any future that is degenerative. Maybe you can, but that is still a much shorter future than the one in which we learn how to partner with nature. And with that, it is my great honor. It's the first time that we get to switch stages to invite Matt Cronin to the stage. I need to introduce Matt as someone I have known for 27 years and discover all over, all the time. And yes, you have a mic. You can tell them more about your other stage performances. But Matt has just finished his term as the editor-in-chief at Annals. And Annals is our biggest journal. It's a journal that asks us to reimagine what knowledge is in management and organization science. It rebuilds the foundation. It's that 0 point that takes stock of the past, of all we thought we know, and it invites us to funnel forward into the future. Matt, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So, thank you. So, I really appreciate you guys hanging with me. Be honest, how many of you are quite tired? Come on. All right. I'm going to know that you are, because 10 days is a long time, and it's an intense thing that you've been hearing about, and even, sort of the enormity of the problems that you're talking about and facing are pretty remarkable. So I want to pull back a little bit. Oana, it was very nice that she told you, who the hell is this guy, and why has he been around, and what's he going to say, and what is he talking about? The question I get when I say I'm going to go talk at a regeneration conference is, what do you know about that? Well, in my mind, regeneration is a quintessentially wonderful example of the good news and the bad news. Let me start with the bad news. I'm from New Jersey. That's how we like to do things. This is going to be a really hard problem. And if you all watched all of those different companies and thought, oh my God, where do I fit in and how do I do this? That is the right reaction, right? But the good news is this is a long game. And as an older person, the long game comes quickly. And there is a place for you to find in this long and important game where you can find far more meaning, more importance, and more value in whatever activity is you're doing when you realize that it's part of this larger production process. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But let me tell you a story also. I got interested in knowledge and how we understand things because in this business that is scholarship, I saw a lot of people working very hard to produce work that would be important and impactful, and instead bemoaning the treadmill that they were on, or that they were unappreciated because they liked to teach, or because somebody wanted them to go out and do a dog and pony show that would surprise and delight, but maybe not change hearts and minds in any lasting way. And I thought, God, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I embarked on a sabbatical. And the second stop on my sabbatical was Ivey, where Oana works. And I remember, now I'm a micro researcher, do research. I started my research on conflict, some stuff on creativity, micro level stuff. But I remember listening to Oana talk about the enormity of these projects and thinking to myself, oh my God, this is really what we need to be doing. And since then, that's kind of kept in my mind, and I've thought about how could we actually do this? And this is where I'll be an interesting counterpoint to Oana's very hopeful, positive view of the future. And I'm going to be that annoying guy who's like, okay, yeah, but how are we going to do this? Right? But at least I might have an answer. So let me talk to you about what that answer looks like. All right. This is what we, those of us in the profession of organizational science and its associated disciplines, do. We start with generation. That's the people doing fundamental research, primary source research out in the field, in the lab, wherever they are developing new data to understand and see how things relate to other things, right? It's what we try and publish. This is most of what we do. All right. Those findings, though, one finding tells you nothing, right? One finding is a brick, maybe. But to put those bricks together and to understand how those bricks get put together, we need to structure that knowledge, and that's what synthesis is. So here's where people, they look at fields, they write reviews, they do meta-analyses, and they do secondary source research to say, how can we put these bricks together into different kinds of buildings that are interesting and useful? We then take that knowledge, that green is the production, and we say, well, our profession has a community that it speaks to, the people who want our knowledge, the people who want to know, how do I do my job better? So we bring them into our classroom and we educate them. We tell them, here's how you should think about what a shareholder or a constituent is. Here's how you should think about what regeneration means. Here's a framework for thinking. Of course, then they have to go back and say, okay, well, I got this framework now. How am I going to use it in my particular context? And that's application. Application is, all right, I understand this generally. What do I do specifically? Now, I think we're all probably going to nod our head and go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Right? What we're missing and what we are going to do and what this field and what you all can do to actually pioneer how this would work is to enlarge it so that it's not the job of you to do all four of those things, right? That it's the job of all of us to specialize and coordinate so that we can do all of those things. And with that, come up with something far greater. So let me give you an example. Anyone know what that is? What is it? It's the Sphere, right. The Sphere is in Las Vegas. That's a building. And not only can it be an eye, it can be anything. It could be an emoji, it can be a picture of the city, so can the inside. It's an engineering marvel, and it cost $2.3 billion to make, and it took 5 years. Now, did one person dream this up and say, hey, I'm going to make that? Hell no. They thought it up. 3 different companies thought it up, imagined it, put it together, raised capital, worked together to try and figure out how this thing could be put together using the skills and abilities of a whole lot of other people. Carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all kinds of things that you can imagine, to come together and build this object. And those people didn't do everything either, even within a narrow framework, because they knew they had a very deep specialization that was based in very old equations. It's hard to read this, but these are all equations that are ancient. And they relate to things like, how does light travel? How does heat travel? How does sound travel? How do we put this together into this incredible feat? That's an enormous undertaking. Almost unimaginable and inconceivable. But it happened because people knew how to work together and what they would have to do. Okay, great, Matt, fabulous. What the hell does this have to do with regeneration? Well, that's what that is. That's not what regeneration is. That's one of the projects that Oana just talked about, right? It is amazing. If I told you, hey, I'm going to make a building that's going to be able to change its form, so you can be inside and look like the building is gone. And no matter where you are, you're going to hear perfectly. And it's just going to be an incredible spectacle. And you may be really excited about that. Somebody's got to build it, though. And somebody's got to pay for it. Well, okay, how are they going to build it, right? Somebody has to draw it, think about it, put it through. How are they going to pay for it? It has to be financed. How are you going to get the people to work on it? It has to be teams. We could do this forever and ever and ever. And regeneration is probably at the end of that same level of complexity. We were talking last night about some of the issues and, how do we get people to think and change their minds simply about the way people should interrelate, right? People, that's not even building anything. That's just getting people to get together and be normal to each other, right? And civil to each other. That in and of itself is quite a difficult thing that is going to draw upon lots of decades, maybe even centuries of research on things like communication, group dynamics, social systems. All of this stuff is the stuff we are building. All of this stuff is the stuff we are doing. We have an enormous long-term problem that requires that each of us pick some point in this cycle, right? And that, by the way, in any one of these cycles, there's a ton of things. If you're down here, you may love lab work, right? You may love doing stuff in the lab. That's different than doing stuff in the field. You might like doing simulations. That's different than doing things with multi-level models. If you're over here, you might like doing meta-analyses. If you're over here, you might love teaching. You might love teaching undergraduates, or you might love teaching executives. All of these are different critical parts of the specialized and coordinated enterprise that we need to be a part of. And the good news is, when we think about it this way, what each of you gets to do is say, what do I care about? I want to do that. Right? I happen to be a theorist, some kind of in that end of the scale. That's what I like doing. That's well and good if I know how to communicate with the educators who might use my theories, or the other people who are using similar kinds of theories come together. And it's good if I use the empirical work that comes from the people who are doing the generation. It's a specialized and coordinated system that makes this happen. The bad news is you have to build it. So as you're thinking about what you're doing, you have to think, where am I in the space? Who do I need to get knowledge from? And who do I need to give knowledge to? And how do I bound that together? This is a very long-term process. But I think, again, regeneration could be sort of the poster child for how to do this if you think about it as one of the most complicated problems we're solving right now, one of the most important problems we're solving right now, and one of the most interdisciplinary problems we're solving right now. This is coordination and specialization at its largest. So that means as you're thinking about the end result, what are we going to do for the planet? You also have to think about how do we actually build a machine that can replicate this? That can replicate this in the faraway reaches of Africa, in the crazy town times of Washington, D.C., in the cold north of Canada, or the Great White North, if I can take my favorite band Rush's way of describing it, to the, hot tropical area of Brazil. That's what we're trying to do. It's about sort of the 98% perspiration that will be enlivened by the 2% inspiration that regeneration brings us to. So it's a big idea, and I guess I'm asking for your commitment, your patience, and if you think with this framework we can get there, it is just going to take some time. But you guys are all young, so that's the way it should go. So now we're going to go back and forth a little bit, and this should be interesting because we have very different ways of thinking. So this will be the very first time we get to kind of hash this out in front of a live studio audience, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. There is no regenerative future unless we learn how to co-specialize the knowledges together. Please choose. And we're going to go back to that dooms scenario. And we're going to work it together, not just Matt and I. We're going to take some heat here and set up some provocations for everyone. But we have planned to have about half an hour of discussions with you about what would be, what kind of knowledge, what kind of practice would get us, would earn us the second chance on Earth. And this comes from an early conversation that tends to throw capitalism as we know it under the bus and asks us to think, it provokes us to think of how else can we organize. It's that building for our field. We don't have theories of partnerships or theories of organizing or theories of supply chains or theories of paradox or theories of working with indigenous community-based enterprises. Everything that you've learned this week are morsels, are signposts on the way we're going. But they need to be built, they need to be integrated, they need to be co-specialized. So when we're thinking about what would a future in which this is the social norm, what would look like? Some of us from Canada know of Robin Wall Kimmerer's book. This book is called The Service Berry and introduces us to, let's say, a counterfactual for capitalism and perhaps the origin point of all humanity, of all community, this idea where we are in kinship relationship with each other and the earth. And this is an actual citation from the book. And in my presentation, there is also a link to where she narrates the whole book, and you can access it. You can access a 44-minute segment for free. And she says, I don't think market capitalism is going to disappear anytime soon. The faceless institutions that benefit from it are far too entrenched. But I don't think it's pie in the sky to imagine that we can create incentives to nurture a gift economy that runs alongside the market economy, where the good that is served is community. After all, what we crave is not trickle-down faceless profits, but reciprocal, face-to-face relationships which are naturally abundant, but made scarce by the anonymity of large-scale economics. We have the power to change that, to develop the local, reciprocal economies that serve community rather than undermine it. And I have chosen this quote because I think it encapsulates 10 days of brilliant speakers, extraordinary workshops, and extraordinary commitment by every person in the room to be part of this future. I think we understand we need these principles to work. We understand it has to be local, it has to be for communities. We just don't know how to get there together. So
I'm going to be bad cop now, and I'm going to ask you all, with that setup, we are the choir. If you go home and you talk to your friend or your old relative who is not on board, what are you going to say to them to get them to try and think differently? Or how might you approach that problem? Oh, you have to, then we get to make you, all right, whoever answers the next question, make sure you're like all the way on the other side so we can keep you running. Oh.
Hi. So I've had this conversation with some of my friends back in London, Ontario. And what I think really worked for me was when I just took them to a local farmer and just told them, how about you try this? And then he kept coming back to the same farmer. And he said my whole family just stopped going back to the supermarket. So I think it's more of an experiential kind of learning than a debate, because when you start talking about the ethics of it rather than the experience of it, we're so entrenched in this globalized idea of choices that we forget that despite having all these choices, we just need very little. We don't really need all the donuts in the shop,
So getting them to see it, feel it, viscerally experience it.
And you can also ask any other questions, launch any other provocation, link these knowledge systems and these keynotes. This is really the last chance we have to be in conversation with one another and reimagine the future together.
Okay, so sorry. When we talk about sustainable world as well, so first of all, the question comes into my mind from the last 10 days. Whom are we building with? Are we building for them or with them? Because that's the key difference. Because if I'm just emphasizing what I'm doing in my life as well and telling them, okay, you need to take it because it's sustainable. But on the other side, they might be thinking that because not everyone is from a business world as well, not everyone is technical, and they might be thinking that we are trying to change them, right? So if we include the community while we are building this sustainable solution, that will make a lot of difference as well. So a community can participate. The only difference is the process will take a little bit of more time, because first of all we need to aware the community what is the difference between sustainable solutions and unsustainable or non-sustainable solutions. And then over the period of time, their thought process will change as well. They will see themselves, okay, this is something which is good for our community and we can participate. Few days ago, I think Professor Sergio bring us to the Jardín Lepanam, the neighborhood in São Paulo. And I was absolutely amazed to see that they call it village or something like a suburbs of Sao Paulo, but over there it was completely a different experience. The streets were clean and there was a playground, there is a school as well, there is a library that is outside of Sao Paulo. And I think in future as well, not just the sustainable solutions build with community, and that will remain sustainable. That I think is the future going forward.
And I want to just, before Sylvia, you like just, one of the things that's good about this is, and it's the reason to provoke, right? This is challenging. You're kind of giving best practices that we can now sort of go home and take, experience, work with. Clearly, those are things I think that often get lost in the shuffle in our excitement to sort of provide the new technology or the new thing.
So yesterday when I arrived home, I talked to my girl, and she had also had a good experience. She is in the finance area. She's 19 years old, and she had the opportunity to talk to one of the, most important CEO of funding asset management here in São Paulo or Brazil. And then I asked her, how was it? And she said, well, it was interesting, but he told me that I should just think of what I would like to do and be creative, because anything else the machine would be able to do that. So, and she said, I don't know what that was about, but I mean, I decided that maybe there's something else I should do besides just thinking about the company's results and money and things like this. And being creative is so difficult. What should I do, Mom? Huh? And then I told her, well, there was something that I was thinking when Oana and I was, performing the workshop. And I said, what is this magic that is happening here in the classroom? And I said, well, Maria, we have a mission, but it's an inner mission that each of us have, and that, it has to make sense to us. So sense making is what is going to happen. It's what is going to make us change the world. And we have to think that if it's just a little change, that is what we have to do, yes? So the idea that Matt was saying, that the collective thing, that your slide was brilliant, yeah? We have to work together. So we were talking about the students perform or the work too. In the table I was talking to the students. There were 3 students that could be connected to, have something that would make the change. So one was the chemistry, one an engineering, and one a physician. They must be here. It was incredible. So the synergy happens when we are all focused on, aligning expectations to change the future. So I'm sorry I talked too much, but that is good to be here and, see the synergy around. So that's the magic of what we've been living. Thank you.
Thank you. And I changed the slides. This is the last slide. And this really, you take the enterprise and you take all the conversations on regeneration and you get this regenerative enterprise. And we get so close to life and living and the experience of what that is. And whether it's the experience on a farm or tasting a new product or cultivating a plant, it's a new way of reconnecting and understanding that we're not alone. I suspect many of us felt quite alone at the beginning of the week. Maybe not me, because I had a lot of friends in the room. The faculty have been following each other for decades. But you may have felt alone. You certainly don't leave feeling alone. You feel part of an ecosystem of like-minded leaders that will ask the tough questions and will imagine those big, beautiful edifices of the future and those economies, those alternative economies that do things differently.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. I know you have a question, but I just... What are we regenerating?
I have had this conversation with Sylvia. I suspect many of you have had this conversation on many times, but certainly in the last week or so.
I think the enterprise.
Yeah. I think we're fundamentally regenerating ourselves, our sense of what humanity is, a sense of deep spirituality, which goes beyond the human interpretations, to reconstitute our place, our standing, our interrelationships, our well-being. We hear a lot about climate and well-being nowadays. It is very hard. Anna Maria used this word earlier. We are part of community. If we cannot be well in a community that is suffering, right? And there are these deep interconnections that if we don't understand, we may still grieve, we may still awe, but we don't do it together. So we're losing part of that connectivity. So of course, at some basic level, we can see whether a patch of land has been regrown, whether a pasture that was depleted is thriving, as Luis has shown you the pictures yesterday. But you have seen his energy, his enthusiasm. You have seen the conversations he had with many of you afterwards. It goes beyond the work out there, and it turns to be some work in here. And from the work in here, there are those moments of connection and magic that I think are part of co-spiritualization. I don't have words for this, but I have seen so many people, farmers, executives, form this instant bonds with each other and get it, that there is a good, better way to do things. And they want to enjoy that. You know, it's like knowing better, doing better, but it's also, why would we go back to ways we don't like and enjoy and connect? But I don't have the academic science for this, but
I'm
it
just
happens.
I'm just asking, and again, I like the idea because I think one of the things that we don't look at is us, right? This job can be difficult. This job can be soul crushing, and it can pull us apart. And I do think that is what's missing.
I would like to ask a question, Oana. I believe all of us here feels the urgency to do something about the planetary boundaries, climate change. And in the last 10 days, we saw many cases, but there's a kind of case we never saw in these days studying, that would be those apocalyptic eco-activism initiatives. We never saw that. And you are talking about bridging with the market. And I see the bright in your eyes when you talk about the cases where we can see the market, even with the third things we understand it's below, but they're doing something to do good. Nothing is perfect. But I would like to understand, trying not to break those bridges, still bridging those bridges. When is the time when, after we feel they are being hypocritical, many companies are being hypercritical, or many initiations, or our neighbors in small scale situations, when is the time that we should do some more radical things? We should lose our patience and put more emotional and try to be an activist, even in the sense to try to be, even if you're lonely, leader by example. When is the time to not try to bridge with the market, but be more activist?
Yeah. When the fields of sugarcane were burning in Brazil, the stock markets fell. The commodity sugar fell, and the world paid attention. They didn't pay as much attention to the burning fires raging in Amazon, who were also burning paper money, because a lot of the decarbonization bonds, a lot of the green bonds that Caroline has been speaking to you, are invested in the Amazon. And they're going up in flames every so often, and they have to be reset. I think we have hardwired ourselves to understand profit and loss far beyond the income statement. And a lot of the writing I do now is trying to shift our attention to what we call the balance sheet. And I talk about assetization, I talk about losses, I talk about things. How do we understand rights and assets? And including in the circular economy and the regenerative economy, we have a large grant. The reports are out, so if you follow us, you will see all the new reports coming out. I think capitalism has done us a disservice by focusing on a single metric, and that is profit, instead of all the architecture and infrastructure of valorizing, creating, organizing, webbing the world together, right? So I'm going to get to the urgency and the grief in a moment. But I think the desperation that people feel, because it's not just hopelessness, they feel the loss of future. And when you lose future, you lose everything. You don't just lose hope. So these movements are, I think none of us talks about these movements, because when you lose the ability to imagine the future, what have you got left to work with? As social scientist, I can tell you, not much. It's not just about restoring hope, but if we don't have imagination, we don't have creativity, we don't have discoveries, we can't make that wheel turn, the enterprise wheel. So there is a place for grief, and grief is stronger than, you can deeply feel loss, you can deeply feel urgency, and the compulsion, not just the urgency, the compulsion to act. But that's not going to solve the problem. That's not even going to clarify the problem. We need patience. We need collective action. We need a different way. And we desperately need to imagine regenerative futures and alternative economies. Because if we lose the capacity, and I'm sorry, my beliefs are very strong when it gets to this. And I have worked with hope and hopelessness in post-genocide countries. I do not take this lightly. I have met people who have learned how to hope in utterly hopeless circumstances. We have not yet lost the earth. There is hope to work with. I think what we don't understand is that hope alone is not going to solve these problems. Hopeless alone is not going to solve this problem. We need to radically reimagine, and not individually, collectively. But we absolutely can. I mean, SECAM was reimagined from scratch 50 years ago. Veja was reimagined in a system that was very inhospitable 22 years ago. You've seen Kapora 6 years ago. Like, we need patience to try this model, but they work. Jarkisarki was successful, reached national commercialization in Finland in just a few years because they valorized the product right. And if we take the tools of capitalism, if we don't kick them to the curb, if we take them, but use them in the correct way, because nobody makes profits just by shifting money around, that there is not value creation there. But if we learn what are the new assets, how can we create new assets? How can we maintain the assets we have? Those are incredible tools to use to regenerate the future.
Hi, thank you for this amazing talk. I'm a pretty positive person, but I mean, this is a big challenge, right? We are talking about regeneration here. And just this morning, I was presenting a paper on how firms are still engaging in corporate social irresponsibility. So we know that there are some great examples like the ones we saw this week, but we also know there are firms that are so far away from getting there. And then, I don't know, I was just reflecting on that, like the two ends of the spectrum, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Let me get us started and maybe invite people from the room as well. The best comeback I have heard to this question is like, if companies are faking it so bad, it must be worth it. And the only thing that makes it worth it, we all want the opposite, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't bother. Like, there wouldn't be so much greenwashing. They wouldn't be faking it so bad. And I think when we look at regeneration, I think there is a genuine desire from the company to work with regeneration, because it does not deny them the right to profit or growth. It just requires them to be imaginative, to be creative, and change their practices. And if we look at the history of corporation, yeah, the devil may be dark today, but let me take you 30 years ago when I was starting my PhD, and we were living in clear cutting, like rainforests were being clear cut. People were protesting the clear cutting. Pollution was rampant. A lot of the industries were just peaking and booming, right? So we have seen worse and we have seen better, and I think it's up to us to balance that. But ultimately, if companies are telling up a good story, it's because we want that story to be true. And we have to shift the balance and look where the energy is and build with that energy.
It's interesting. So I feel, again, the macro-micro difference. And I immediately go to thinking about the people who are running these companies and the people who are sort of like enabling them or not. It's shocking to me, but very common, how people will say, I need to do X, I should do X, I know how to do X, I'm not going to do X, right? And I think our field still, while we recognize that hope matters and all of these other emotional things matter, we still act as though the mechanics are rational. So if I were to be really honest, I kind of feel like we should loop in the clinical psychologists and say, how do we get people to change the behaviors that they know are bad? How do we get them to look honestly? Coaching doesn't do that. Coaching says you're great just as you are. I just have to help you be better. Psychology says you want to change who you are because it's not working for you. So maybe that needs to be part of this enterprise as well.
So we have time for another 3 questions, okay? So it's one here, one there, one there. Sorry.
Actually, I don't. It's not a question. It's something that I was thinking about. We discuss later. So, what we are changing here? What is the generative thing here? I think from my side, thinking as a student, that this past week has been such an incredible regenerative thing inside from out. From inside to outside. So I would like to say to my Brazilian colleagues that are here that I think that we are feeling the same that I am feeling from this week. We have rethinking a lot of things through this week, and I'm really thankful for that. I know that we changed a lot since the last Monday, and to be honest, I think as well the another part of the students here, because we are from developing countries and we have so much things to learn, so many things to learn here and during this week, and I think that will be a future generation of nice leaderships that will thinking about everything that we have discussing until now. So I completely agree with you about these hopeless, and I am seeing that we are not hopeless alone, as you said. We are young people that believe in a good future. I know that there's a lot of things that get us sad, but we are here, we are a community, and for sure there is a good future from now on, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
Speak first.
You can speak first. Yes, you can.
Okay, hey guys. Such a hard week, to be honest. But I think I realize that best has appeared right now. And to be honest, Oana, thank you so much, and Matthew, for your presentation. And I just have a comment and a specific question. One realization during this week is realized that society and our world has been solving exponential problems with linear solutions. Our decisions has a multidisciplinary impact in our future, in long term. However, my question for you, Oana and Matthew, is how we can drive its complexity in an easy way.
You take this one first.
Complexity is only complexity until we understand it. When we understand it, we can manufacture complexity. This is what you usually see when people are first beginning. Me, not me. He who grasps the point of each contingency sees the chaos that surrounds it as pure transparency. This is what we move towards. When we truly understand a situation, even a complicated one, we can see the elegant solution that doesn't require all of the crazy stuff. We see this is the part that really matters. That's what any master really does. And that's going to take time. I don't think we force it.
I think that's why Matt is resetting the knowledge wheel. I have nothing to add, and I don't have a Ruby code. So well done, Matt. Let's go to the closing question.
Okay, I'll try to be brief because I think your thoughts would be wonderful. Matt, earlier, if I can call you Matt, sure. Earlier you mentioned, you asked Oana if what have we regenerated? And after these 10 days, I'm thinking, have you or have we or are we regenerating also thinking and thought and language? Because I know language is constructed, but at the same time is also in our nature. But when we start talking to each other, and I mean, as a Portuguese person in Brazil, different versions of Portuguese, again, is nature and construction. So what have you to say? I think you got what I'm trying to say. I would like to hear your thoughts, if you could share it with us.
No, give me a little bit more, like, so.
Oh, okay, from a
Yeah.
perhaps from a linguist's background. We're born into a natural environment, into a social environment. We learn language from our parents, from our siblings, from neighbors, and we develop a natural form of communication. We go to school and are influenced by our schools, by our school system, and then come home and discuss with parents, etc. And we evolve that language and that form of thinking, hopefully for the best, not always, but hopefully. And then we go into PhDs, careers, and so on. But then that language becomes part of our nature. We all have friends and we all know how they express themselves, how they communicate. But as we share ideas and thoughts about regeneration of our environment, of biodiversity in nature, I'm thinking, don't we also apply regenerative thinking and regenerative processes to our forms of communication and to our forms of thinking? And shouldn't we value that as well as part of the future, particularly when we're surrounded by such wonderful young people?
Okay, so that's great. I'm really glad you gave me that, because this is one of the reasons I love talking about the enterprise. And when I present it, I usually say I put my name and then I put lots of other people, lots of other universities. So this will be one of those, right? We are regenerating each other, but the language is a really interesting one because much like regenerating land, or the ocean, or a town, it's very easy to throw surface level changes and to say, we're going to use this word, not that word. A colleague of mine said, don't use myopic, which means because it's mean to people who wear glasses, right? And I think that's performative. If we're interested in truly not making people feel marginalized, that's a lot deeper. And so much like that, thinking seriously about the language that we use and where it falls short and where it does not is an excellent way to, I haven't considered that problem until you said it, but it's a really great one. And it's got a wonderful whole historical precedent, Wittgenstein, right? Who was really all about like thought as language. You may even disagree with that. Large language models, language has become central because what they think the world is comes from our words, not the world. So I think that's a wonderful challenge, and it's again a challenge not just for us as as scholars to regenerate each other, but the frameworks of thought that we have. And so I'm definitely going to have to think more about that. But thank you very much for sort of getting me to think that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna offer this back as the closing provocation for all of us, because many of us are in a foreign language, in a foreign culture, and we know when we hear human spoken words in a different language, we know we don't understand them. And we can use translation or we can learn to speak them. And I think the same provocation is with nature. Nature speaks to us constantly, but we don't always understand what we don't understand yet. And one of the wonderful interventions I have seen performed is what if we were to make a sound that is not a human word? Most of us would make a natural sound, whether it was hushing of the wind or humming of the bees, or, like, it will be a natural sound. We have the ability to replicate sounds of nature, but we have lost the ability to be in communication with nature. And quite frankly, even to listen to nature. So if I can end with a provocation, is just make those micro spaces where you can listen, where you can experience awe, and know what you don't know. We are not supposed to, we cannot possibly understand everything, but we can begin that journey. And that leads to more sounds and more knowledge and more, and that's how knowledge gets built. If we take seriously partnering with nature, maybe we should take seriously how nature speaks and how are we engaged in that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That close keynoting. Thank you for the deep thoughts and all your knowledge you shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Grazie. Since you are already center stage, I'm gonna embarrass you very publicly by saying you have scaffolding an enterprise here. This is the closest I think Matt can come to witness the enterprise. You have brought together in conversation some of the best practitioners, thought leaders, practice leaders, yourself included. You have built an incredible team. We're just having more people in the team here. Thank you for including us as part of this enterprise.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.